morning, everyone. Hi, this is episode 170 of Woolen Spinning. My name is Rachel, and I can be found pretty much as well. Girls, thank you so much for being. Thank you for coming to this place every week. If you're a new viewer, thank you for checking out the show and checking out what we do here. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much. If you could please hit the subscribe button down below, that would be very much appreciated. And if you're a patron of the show, so much for continuing to support the show and supporting the work here. I really appreciate it. You're welcome in this place, and we are going to be talking a lot today about spinning and getting ready for Spin Together. So Spin Together is a week of spinning, all things spinning. You can be on a team, you can just sort of spin on your own and spin along with everybody. I'm actually going to be spinning with Sweet Georgia, Team Sweet Georgia here, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And it's kind of like previous years of crazy spin weeks, and yeah, I think it'll be really fun. So kickoff is later today, and as well, it is Knit City this week. So Knit City this weekend is a big local festival. Sorry, the cords are all like jumbled up in my lap here, and they're kind of annoying me. Knit City is happening this weekend, so for more, please visit knitsocial.ca. There's online vendors. Katrina's doing a pop-up all day today via Zoom. You can look for Instagram, Crafty Jacks, at Crafty Jacks on Instagram for the Zoom meeting information. And I just hope that you guys check out some of the vendors and maybe support some of them. And there's also workshops this weekend. I'm taking one tomorrow. It's about dyeing in the Pacific Northwest. I'm just something that I'm kind of interested in is the dye stuffs and the plants and whatnot. And then Katrina and I are actually doing a workshop later in the afternoon about our book, Unbraided. So lots going on here this weekend. And unfortunately, we have been fighting colds all weekend and not feeling particularly well. Yesterday, I really did not have a voice at all, so I'm just hoping that my voice doesn't give out today. And unfortunately, now the kids have lovingly passed it on to Mike, so he's sick. So they just left for soccer. It's really tight to be able to do the live stream at 8:15 now because James has to be on the soccer field at 9 a.m. And so it's very tight for us to sort of configure and jigger everybody around. So I might move the podcast to 8:30 Pacific Daylight Time. So if that changes for next weekend, just to give us a little bit of wiggle room, I will let you guys know in the show notes that are published on the Friday before the live stream next morning. Oh, thank you, Jennifer, for your comment on my sweater. So this is Pink Velvet by Andrea Mowry. I did mine in Shetland, New England, is the blue in, I think it was called Loden Blue. And the main color, the coral, is called Coral, and it's Jameson Spindrift, and which is a woolen 2-ply. And I lengthened the sweater. Remember, I was talking about maybe lengthening it, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I ended up putting on a whole extra inch of ribbing at the bottom, and I'm really glad that I did. I had enough yarn to be able to do that, and it's really made all the difference. So yeah, thank you for your compliments. Welcome everybody to the stream this morning. Thank you so much for your already super chatty. I am wondering who is participating in Spin Together this week. So if you guys are, let me know and tell me what you are prepping, because we are definitely going to talk a little bit about what I'm prepping. So in today's show, I have a little bit of, I don't really have like major housekeeping. If you're interested in what's going on here at Woolen Spinning and you want to know more, please check out the show notes. They're available at patreon.com/WelfordPearls, and there's information there about books that I've written, the tin can knits along that we're doing that we'll talk about later in the show. Book club information is down there. Our 51 yarn spin along is there. The newsletter that's put out every month, roughly around the middle of the month. So yeah, if you want to know more about what's happening here at Welford Pearls and at Woolen Spinning, please check out the post. Being a patron of the community and participating in the Patreon community helps me to keep the lights on here and to pay for streaming costs, hosting costs, equipment costs, all that stuff. So even just $1 a month makes a big difference, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much. So a couple of things off the wheel, a couple of things off the loom, and a couple of things going onto the wheel, and a couple of things being prepped to go onto the wheel. So lots to talk about. I think maybe what I'll do is I'll start first with let's start first with the credits, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Hit the wrong button there. Sorry, guys. So it's good to see everybody. We've got a lot of people in the chat this morning. So Sarah is knitting her shifty sweater. She's trying not to lose track of her increases while she reads the chat. I saw this is Carol's first live stream. So welcome, Carol, and welcome to the community. Becca is busy hand sewing a pillow cover for her son's new wool bolster pillow, which is very cool. Janine mentions that the smoke has cleared enough that the sun is actually bright today, and she's spinning, but she's still inside. So it's interesting that you had mentioned about the smoke, Janine, because we are now experiencing a bunch of smoke again. So you know how a couple of weeks ago we were just absolutely, our visibility and our smoke situation was really bad, as it was in Washington, as it was in Oregon, and of course parts of Oregon were on fire. Parts of Washington were on fire, and now we're back to smoky skies and kind of that illusion of that purpley pink twilight-ish kind of look over top of everything, and it's from the smoke covering the sun. So we're back to smoky skies and smoky mornings, and of course it's the California fires. Really, my heart goes out to those who are in the midst that and actually having to live it, because obviously we've had lots and lots of fires up here in BC. All our lives up here at some point have been touched by forest fires, and so I'm very deeply empathetic when people are going through fires, and just hope that everybody is hanging in there, and that everybody's safe, and that livestock is safe. Charlotte is doing spin together with her local yarn shop, and she preps some bats from carding waste and sari silk. Very cool, Charlotte. We normally get a hard frost by the 2nd or 3rd week of September, and we haven't had one yet. It's weird. I still have veggies growing in my garden. Oh, that is weird, Kelly. So Kelly is actually in Edmonton, Alberta, which is quite far north. Not as far north as the Arctic, but still quite far north compared to where other people are watching from, because we've got somebody from Texas, which is sort of the opposite end of the North American continent. So very cool. Tessa is on Sweet George's team. Tessa's local to me. I hope you're checking out some of the Knit City stuff this weekend, Tessa. Greta has a broken nose. That's a real bummer, Greta. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope that you're feeling better. Her daughter broke it when she was swinging at the park yesterday, and hoping it doesn't have to be reset. Oh, Greta, I hope not. Keep icing it, my friend. It's interesting because we were playing, I'm sure many of you who have young children know the game Grounders. So we were playing Grounders at the playground. If somebody doesn't know what Grounders is, just ask in the chat and somebody will tell you. So we were playing Grounders, and we were at a campground that is about 4 hours from here. And we often will do an overnight there on our way to somewhere else in the interior of British Columbia. So it's a really good halfway point as we get into the kind of northern belt of the country, of the province, if you will. And we were playing Grounders, and Nora is fiercely competitive, as is my husband, who's fiercely competitive. And he was trying to get away from her, and she was chasing him, because if you're on the ground and you're not actually on the playground, the person who is it's a form of tag, basically. The person who's can have their eyes open, but then as soon as they go up onto the playground structure, they have to close their eyes. So Nora was on the ground, so she had her eyes open, and so she was chasing Mike across the park. And he jumped up onto one of the bars, one of the swinging, playground bars, and he went to pull himself up and then try to funnel himself under. He was like trying to be all fancy, and he smashed the roof of his nose, and he just went like boof, boof, and just like straight back onto the pebble gravel, and he just laid there. I was like, uh-oh, we're in the middle of nowhere. at a playground. He's probably given himself a concussion. He's probably broken his nose. And we have 2 young children. Okay, what are we gonna do? So I'm very, very sympathetic, Greta. So for Spin Together, I've actually been doing some prep, and I thought I would talk about this first because I had put in the show notes that I am going to be spinning up my CVM fleece from my friend Liz, who is the owner and operator of Kingdom Fleece and Fiberworks in Vermont. And I was going to spin, and they're actually just over there. One is a light gray and one is a medium gray. They're both quite light. I'll just grab them to show you. I've shown them on the podcast before. She pin drafted both of these for me. So this is CVM fleece. We've talked about Gayleen and her fleeces on the podcast quite a bit. And a whole bunch of us got fleeces from her as she was shutting down and moving. And I have this one, and then the other one is like half a shade darker. And my friend Greta, who's local to me, her and I split both of the fleeces, and we split the cost, which was really great because neither of us needed like a 7-pound fleece. So my plan for Spin Together was to spin up one of these. I'm still planning on doing that, but then I was thinking about it last night, and I was sort of, I've been having this love affair with thicker yarn recently, and I think a lot of it is that I want to, there's a couple of sweaters that I would like to make that are a little bit, they're sort of more like worsted weight, heavy DK, and I've been doing my bulkiest yarn spin for 51 yarns, and because that was one of the yarns that I still had needed to do before we Group A finishes by the end of the year. And so I've been sort of working through that yarn, and so what I ended up coming up with was I had sent, along with some other stuff to Liz, I sent off this Cormo that I've had in my stash for quite a long time. I bought it from my friend Elizabeth of Sarah Elizabeth Fiberworks, and she's local to me here. And I had a really tough time getting it clean, and there was just an inordinate amount of lanolin, and every time I tried to wash it and scour it and get it clean, it would just wouldn't come clean, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And so I sent the pound down to Liz. And so this is it here. It's all pin drafted. It's 100% Cormo. It's from a fleece that Elizabeth had from, I think the label said Montana, but I might be wrong. Anyways, absolutely beautiful. Or maybe it was California. I feel like it was California. I have the tag somewhere. Anyhow, I sent it to Liz saying like it's really, really become quite crunchy, and it's really difficult to get clean, and I haven't been able to, and I'm not really sure what to do with it. Anyways, Liz said, well, I'll wash it and I'll see what I can do, and if it's not salvageable, I'll let you know, kind of thing. Or we could put it in and blend it with something else. Anyhow, she got it beautifully clean. She scoured it up. So last night I did 15 grams of a sample. And so I did a 2-ply, very, very high twist. I'll see if I can get the camera even a little bit closer. I don't usually like going in because the camera gets a bit dark, but we'll make it work today. So I did this sort of slightly darker, or sorry, slightly thicker spin. Very, very light, very bouncy. This is definitely next to the skin soft. This is not fiber that I normally would work with, and I'm not sure how it will wear in a sweater. Unfortunately, it's very, like, because the fiber is so super stinking soft, and it's not particularly long stapled. I think that there's I don't know why, but a whole bunch of Shetland bits and pieces got into it. Like I'm pulling out, well, that was one of my hairs, but it's it didn't come out very clean. I'm not really sure why it didn't come out super clean. Anyhow, I was trying to spin a bulkier weight, so I was trying to spin the singles to be about 14 wraps per inch for a finished yarn of about 7 to 8 wraps per inch. I think that's what I was doing. Or maybe 16 wraps per inch for the singles, then 8 wraps per inch for the finished yarn. I think that's what I was kind of going for. And I had 15 grams, and so I did this sampling. And oh, hi Mars, it's good to see you. And so as I was spinning, I was really trying intentionally to spin thicker. And what I did was I took the pin drafted roving and I actually split it in half, and then I tried is the opposite, the objective word here, not to pre-draft. So I tried to just very gently attenuate the fibers and then just spin them, and then and kept it quite low twist. I was spinning on like 8-to-1, 6-to-1, something like that. And then when I went to ply, I went for a super high twist angle, which has actually been preserved in the finished yarn, which is pretty cool, and tightened it up. And I really just wanted to see what would happen. Like, this is just a sample. I just wanted to see, because I don't know that I can spin this entire bag of fiber lace weight fine 32-inch wraps per inch, or 44 wraps per inch, or whatever, and make this round 3-ply. Like, I'm not really sure that's really what I want to do. What this little sample has done is basically left me with more questions, and I'm not sure what I want to do. And this is actually still damp from last night. I can feel as I touch it, I can still feel the wetness in it. So I'm not sure that I'm going to spin this for Spin Together, but I did do this big sample. I'm going to figure out my grist next. So this was 15 grams. I'm not exactly sure what the finished yardage was, because I knew I would lose some in the washing and finishing process, but you can see the elasticity. Lots and lots of stretch. And I'm just really hoping that I can create a yarn, a sweater yarn of some kind that would actually wear quite well and be quite lovely for a sweater. I just don't know what I want to make, which sweater I want to make, but I would like to do slightly thicker yarn. Yeah, so I'm just not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not in love with this finished sample. But it's still damp, and maybe I'll change my mind as it sort of finishes. But in the meantime, the CVM, I am going to spin woolen. It's going to be long backwards draw. I've cleared off my bobbins on my Lendrum Saxony, which is behind me, and I'm just going to fill up bobbin after bobbin and ply as I go. So that's kind of my short-term plan, if you will. Yeah. Yeah, you're right, Tessa. It is a busy weekend for sure, because there's the Fiber Love Affair, which is like an online marketplace this weekend as well, and there's Knit City. And people were posting in the Slack channel that there's other festivals going on this weekend as well. So it's certainly been and going to be a very busy weekend. So I spun this little skein of yarn up this weekend. It's not that little, it's 4 ounces. It's called The Last Huzzah by Spunky Eclectic. It was the August Fiber Club, August 2020 Fiber Club last hurrah. Sorry, I keep saying huzzah, but it's actually the last hurrah. This was a really interesting spin, so let me undo it for you. It was very, very fast. I divided the braid into 2, and then each half I stripped down 4 times, and I just spun end to end. There was nothing really super special about this preparation or this spin, but what made it really super interesting is the drape, the heaviness, the density of the yarn. It is 60% merino, 35% mohair, and 5% nylon. So the finished yarn is quite heavy and it's quite dense from the mohair. It has a nice halo, not a ton, but it'll fuzz up over time. I did spin it on my Magicraft Pro, which is quite a fast wheel, and I like to use it for yarns that are higher twist, that I need more ply twist, that I plied the Cormo on it, for example. And it's a really fast wheel for me. It's part of the reason why I got it. One of the things that Amy recommends with this spin is not putting too much twist into it and not putting in, because it becomes like rope. And so I've spun merino mohair blends before. And so what I did, and I just wanted to see what would happen. So this was kind of a bit of an experiment. I wanted to spin a little bit thicker. Like I said, I've been having kind of this love affair with spinning a bit thicker lately. And I wanted to put more twist into the singles than I maybe otherwise would have. So here's my spinner's control card. And I will put this in focus for you. And if you see on the top there, it doesn't look like it, but the yarn is actually quite rope-like. And if you run your fingers down it, it feels quite firm. And this was my ply back test. So you can see that my ply back test was actually quite firm as well. And for me, because often I do lower twist singles and then I'll do a higher twist ply. So with this one, I did the opposite. So when you ran your fingers down the singles, they actually felt, like I said, dense, a little bit ropey. I didn't actually like the way that they felt. But the reason why I did that was then I kept the twist angle of the plied yarn. So this was pre-washing. I kept the ply twist very low. So you might be able to see it a little bit better here. I kept the ply twist here very low. It's like 30 to 35 degrees. And then the finished yarn, because so much of that twist dissipates in the water and so much of it lets go and all of that active energy just relaxes in the water and it just kind of, you know, dissipates when it goes for a swim. There isn't really a better word to describe it. It just sort of, that energy releases. I ended up with this very, very gentle twist angle throughout the yarn, which isn't my favorite aesthetic, I'll be totally honest. But on the other hand, it's ended up giving me this really, really lovely lace yarn. So it's heavier than a lace yarn. It's more like a sport weight. So I'm using lace not from a perspective of knitting weight. I'm using it from the perspective of the type of yarn that I made. So, you know, we talk about worsted spun yarns, woolen spun yarns. This is a lace type yarn where the singles were spun with higher twist to make them more firmer. And then the plied yarn, I kept the twist angle really super low, which you can see, especially through here, you can see that barber pulling there and how gentle that twist angle is. It's sort of just 30 degrees. And what will happen in the knitted fabric is when you go and do yarn overs and some lace work is all of that will open up and bloom, and those yarn overs will become even bigger. So I don't know what shawl pattern I will use this for, but that is my plan, is to put this aside in my stash. And I need my show notes. I was playing around with the cameras, and to have that sort of set aside for something. I was actually thinking, I don't think I have enough yardage, but I was thinking that something like, is it Sylvia McFadden? Her Waiting for Rain shawl. Have you guys seen that? It's a garter stitch, and then it's got these and it uses short rows for the shaping to create these sort of crescent shaped lace panels. I'm not exactly sure what my yardage is for this. I did actually calculate it based on my grist, but I'm not sure I wrote it down. Waiting for Rain by Sylvia McFadden. I was right. This is the link for it. Hi, Christy. Good to see you. And I'm not sure if I wrote it in my show note in my handspun page or not. I don't think I've even added it yet. No, I haven't. I thought that I had done the grist for this yarn, but I actually hadn't. I think I meant to for the show, and then I didn't get around to it with everything else that was going on. It's been a really strange week because of the kids being home all week. It's been really disjointed. I sort of have felt pulled in a lot of different directions and having them home. And then because I got the cold as well, the dread cold, which is basically just a sore throat. That's how it's been manifesting. And the kids have been dropping like flies at school. Tons and tons and tons of kids and teachers home. And I think it was Thursday, I was really not feeling well, and my throat was really, really, really sore. And it started to let go yesterday, but I didn't really have a voice yesterday. So I went to book club and I muted myself and I just listened. It was so lovely. I really, really enjoy spending that time with you guys. And I felt badly that I wasn't contributing, but I had no voice. So on Thursday, we actually, me and the kids, because they're both home, I had to go and pick up James early from school on Wednesday. And then Thursday, the three of us were home. Mike was at work. He wasn't feeling 100%. but I really wanted to make sure the kids were well enough to go to tutoring on Thursday night, and they had no other symptoms, and so their tutor was happy to see them, and they were just tired. And so, and she's in the school system as well. And so she's sort of seen this cold go through everyone. No fever, there's no other symptoms. It's just this sore throat and fatigue. So we spent the whole day, we popped this massive bowl of popcorn and we sat on the couch and watched movies all day. So if you guys have kids at home, school-age children, I know we all like can't stand Dora the Explorer. Like, I know we all are like, ugh. The Real People movie called Dora, it is awesome. It is so good. The kids loved it. I loved it. We're gonna watch it again tonight with Mike because he missed it. It is so good. And I'm not a movie person. We don't watch a lot of TV. I don't get into TV shows very easily. I'm not interested. They're fine. I just don't have the attention span for it. And we all really enjoyed it. The three of us sat there transfixed. She does have a few variations. That's right, Becca. So Becca said, I love that shawl, Waiting for Rain. And Sylvia has some awesome patterns. So I think what I might do is actually look through because she has, and she's local to me, she has so many patterns, and she actually has a number of shawls that are 2-color. And I have quite a few skeins of yarn in my stash that I would really like to use up and feature in some projects. And so I think what I might do is find something to go with this and do a 2-color shawl and just find a pattern that I can knit until both yarns are used up, kind of thing. So really happy with how this turned out. I will figure out grist and yardage and whatnot. I will post it in my hand spun projects page on Ravelry. And if you are curious and you are not on Ravelry, just message me and I'll let you know. Because I know sometimes with these yarns, with these different fibers, these different blends, sometimes it's hard to tell what your grist might be and what you can maybe expect. So again, a little bit heavier. You can see the halo actually when I hold it up here. You can see that haloing, especially here from all of that mohair. In some ways, I'm kind of bummed that there's nylon in here. It would have been really neat for this yarn to be a 60-40 merino mohair, but I'm sure that they developed this blend with socks in mind, and I just don't need any more hand spun hand knit socks. I'm still recovering from all of the hand spun hand knit socks. So I started a new spin this past week, and let me just change over cameras. We will look at this later. I was prepping for this spin. So this is Westcoast color. This is my friend Lynn, and I'm sorry that the camera is so dark. So I had mentioned last week, maybe the week before, that I've got some new camera equipment, which is so exciting. I'm so pleased. Thank you to you guys, because the reason why we have it is because of your support. And I messed up on one of the settings, and I didn't realize that it was actually auto setting to a bit darker. Gotta love learning new technology. So these videos are a little bit darker, so I am sorry about that, and I hope that you can maybe increase the brightness on your tablet or laptop if you're watching on sort of more of a mobile device just for a few minutes. So this blend is called Karma. This is Westcoast color. This is Lynn's new label that she's using, and Lynn is local to me and Tessa actually, and Katrina. She's here in the Okanagan in a place called Tappan, British Columbia, and which actually is just a lovely part of the world. And if you're in any of the states that sort of border this part of the Pacific Northwest, so like Washington or Oregon or Idaho, if you have an opportunity when things open up and when we're sort of through this very challenging COVID-y time, and you want to do a family trip with your family and you don't really want to get on an airplane and you want to just sort of do a driving trip or maybe with some girlfriends for the weekend, come up to the Okanagan and go on a wine tour. It is a great time. There are some amazing people, and if you're a spinner, you can go visit Sarah Elizabeth in the Kootenays, and you can visit Lynn and at Westcoast Color, and there's Lori of Disdarrow Ranch, and there are so many others that I'm forgetting. Oh, hi, Laureline. I hope dropping off your daughter worked out well. She's just joining us now, and Rebecca is joining us. Just remember to switch on the stream. It's so good to see you, Rebecca, as well. So anyway, so Lynn's, this blend is this really interesting Karma blend that she calls it. And it's a 50% yak, 50% merino blend. And the yak and merino are naturally colored, so they're not white. The yak is a dark brown color, which is consistent with what you get with yak fiber. And you can see in the fiber, as I'm prepping it here, that you can see how the acid dyes that are normally very bright, normally very cheerful like this, take to the wool when it's a darker color underneath in a very different way. So much more muted, much more toned down, much quieter. So what I did with I have 3 braids of this. They're each 50 grams. And what I did was I jumbled them all up and I created these little nests. And so you can see how dark the color is. Like, even though the camera is reading as dark, you can see that the fiber itself is very dark. And this gorgeous dark greeny, tealy, greeny blue kind of color, you can see how dark that takes on the fiber and that lovely heathering in there. So no matter what I do with the fiber, no matter how I spin it, no matter how I prep it, whether I do 2-ply or 3-ply or leave it as singles, which I wouldn't do with this fiber because it's so short stapled, which I'll talk about in just a minute. This fiber is going to be a dark yarn. No matter what you do, even if you plied it with a white to lighten it, you're still going to end up with a really dark yarn. So when you see fiber like this on the showroom floor at a festival or in a local yarn shop or on an Etsy shop, no matter what you do with this yak in there and that dark, dark brown yak, it's going to come out dark. And because it's 50-50 merino yak, I'm going to ask you guys in the chat a little bit of a pop quiz. Do you think it's going to spin like yak, or do you think it's going to spin like merino? What do you think? Very, very interesting experiment. So as I'm prepping it here, I just stripped it down. I just kept taking these little bits of fiber and just very, very gently pulling them apart in the center and trying to sort of leave the prep intact as much as possible. And I just pulled them apart very gently like that, as you can see. And I just did that over and over and over again to create all of these little nests of fiber. This one's actually a bit too thick, so I'm going to... I also wonder if you guys, so Rebecca says she spun that blend a couple of years ago, and I think the merino was felt dominant. Has anybody else spun this blend before? You guys are pretty much 50-50. Does it depend on the longer staple length? Not really, Martha. Really good question. Not really. If anything, it depends on what is the shorter stapled fiber, because if you're drafting to the longer stapled fiber, you're either going to have the fiber, the shorter staples, bunching up in your hand and not drafting through, or you're going to end up with a very inconsistent yarn because your length of draft is too long for those shorter stapled and the medium staples that are in there. That's a great question. I agree with Becca. Merino can really blend into the background when a unique fiber is blended. I have undyed yak silk that I'm hoping to spin and then dye. That's awesome, Mars. Only spun 50-50 silk and yak before. Otherwise, yak has always been fairly low percentage. I have spun merino yak silk, but never 1-to-1 yak and silk. So Francis says yak. Sarah says yak. It spins like yak. So the reason for that is that merino kind of blends into the background. When you're spinning a wool silk blend, it will spin like silk. If you're spinning, whenever you're spinning a 50-50 fiber, more often than not, the wool kind of fades to the background and it's the other fiber that sort of takes over. Starting to lose my voice. So I'm just warning you guys in case it just stops working. It's like a machine. In case it stops working, and then what are we going to do? Give it a tune-up? I don't know. So what I was really surprised about with this spin is that as I was spinning it, my hands were too far apart. I was also holding onto the fiber at first too hard. So as I was spinning, you see how, oh, I need to move my camera. I made a note for myself to move my camera and then I didn't. Here we go. I'm going to make, actually, I'm going to put myself down here and I'm going to make myself smaller so that you can see what I'm doing. So if you note how close my hands are together, like I'm about an inch apart, and if you notice how short my distance of draft is. Now, the reason for that is that yak is an incredibly short stapled fiber. It tends to do really well clouded and spun from the cloud. Sorry, carded and then spun from the cloud. It's a very light, very warm fiber. This is eventually going to be a shawl. This fiber just screams shawl to me. Might actually be waiting for rain. It depends on what I get for yardage. So what happens, and what I was reflecting on actually, so Mike took the kids to tutoring on Thursday night, like I mentioned, and I was feeling terrible. My throat was just awful. And I actually watched, okay, so this has been the week of the movie. I watched the Tom Hanks movie about Mr. Rogers. I don't know how many of you guys are Gen Xers. I'm technically an elder millennial. We've talked about this on the show before, but for those who watched Mr. Rogers, you have to watch that movie. It is on Amazon Prime. I didn't actually cry. I'm a crier when it comes to certain movies. But it was so heartwarming, and he uses throughout the movie nonviolent communication. And Mr. Rogers was known, the Reverend Mr. Rogers was known for his use of nonviolent communication. And if you've never heard of nonviolent communication, it was developed by Marshall Rosenberg, PhD, and I highly recommend checking out his book, Nonviolent Communication. My husband and I have used it and continue to try to learn more. And it's a practice, it's a craft, and it's something that you have to work at. And throughout the movie, he models it, and Tom Hanks does such an amazing job of modeling how to live non-violently. It's amazing. It's amazing. Anyways, watch the movie. So, Mr. Rogers was a huge part of my childhood. Such an amazing film. It was, Becca. In some ways, I kind of wanted to like host a Zoom meetup and we could watch it together. There's this one part, I have to tell you, there's this one part where the main character, so it's funny because the story of Mr. Rogers is actually told through another person. So you actually are following the other person's life, and Mr. Rogers is sort of almost a secondary character, which is very interesting how they did that, which I think if you watched the show and you knew anything about him, I think he would be pleased about that. I think he would be pleased that it wasn't about him per se, but it was about him. And so the main character shares a very deeply painful experience with Mr. Rogers, and he sits quietly for a moment and then he says, "Thank you for sharing that with me." And it's just silent. Like the movie is very silent. And there's another part in the diner where he asks him, Lloyd is the character, where Mr. Rogers asks him if he can just sit for a moment and just be quiet for a moment and remember the people and the names of the people who fostered him to be the person he is today. And the movie literally spends a full minute, silent. It's unbelievable. So anyways, you have to watch it. If you hold on to your fiber supply with the Karma too tightly though, what's going to happen is even if your hands are really super close together, and even if you're spinning to the yak, because like I said, the merino kind of fades to the background, you'll end up with in your fiber supply hand. So for me here, it's backwards because I'm spinning this way and showing you this way. So I'm kind of the opposite to how I'm spinning on the camera here. But basically, if this is my fiber supply hand, and this is my drafting hand, if this hand is clenching down too hard and you're holding your fiber too hard, you'll continue to draft the merino and you'll continue to pull on the merino and pull it forward. But what you'll find, and I'm actually doing it right now, which is really quite amazing, there's a whole bunch of yak right here, and I've managed to only draft the merino because I'm holding on too tightly. So then it feels like the merino is dominant, and yet if you move your hands further apart, you again lose that yak and your yarn becomes thick and thin. So you have to keep your hands really super close together and spin it as if it's 100% yak. Lots of twist, because of course yak doesn't have any staple lengths, or sorry, any scales. It doesn't have any grip. So the twist is what holds the yak together. But you're going to lose it if your hands are too far apart or holding on too tight. Does that make sense? So if you strangle your fiber and hold on to a spin like this too much, you'll literally, and when I was first starting this spin, I immediately experienced it. You'll literally end up with a clump of yak, almost like left behind. And it's because you're holding on to that fiber too tightly, and the merino continues to draft. And you're kind of like, oh, I'm in a nice rhythm here. This is working. And then you realize that you've got all this yak in your fiber supply. So let me catch up. Oh, thank you for sharing that, Kathy. Yeah, he was a war hero. That's right. Elder millennial is a hot topic of debate in my house. That's awesome, Kelly. Yeah. Gen X versus, it's really hard. Like, you know, we're not really Gen Xers, but there are things about Gen X that we identify with. It's really hard. There's a great book, Why We Can't Sleep, The New Midlife Crisis by Ada Calhoun. If you haven't checked it out and you're a Gen Xer and you're a woman, I would highly recommend reading that book. She's based in Boston, I think. She was interviewed on our Canadian Broadcasting Corporation on CBC, and the interview was excellent, and the book was equally awesome. I'm spinning pure yak from the cloud right now, and I love spinning it woolen from a fluffy handfuls. Absolutely, and your supported spindles, Becca, that just must be amazing. The Debbie Held talks about on her support spindling workshop. She actually, on the School of Sweet Georgia, she talks about saving all of her most precious, most amazing fibers for her support spindles, and I really get that. I watched that movie on the plane back from Vancouver, and I cried and cried. Oh, Rebecca. I'm not surprised. You were probably tired and emotional, and oh my goodness, yeah. I did a sweater years ago where I didn't realize, and it has never pilled. Oh, seems like things spin according to the shortest staple or the more slippery fiber. Absolutely, Mars. The dye job is very saturated. That Lynn is kind of known for that. If you haven't spun Lynn's fiber, she's an amazing dyer and an amazing fiber artist. So definitely support her if you can. Spinning as a life lesson, what happens when we hold too tight. It's so true, Jennifer. Oh, I so appreciate that. Come to think of it, I've never spun 100% yak or merino to compare, but my 50-50 yak merino reminded me of an 80-20 merino silk that I've spun. Very cool. I always spin woolen. I don't pinch at all anymore for exactly that reason, says Rebecca, or says Becca. Oh, welcome, Maggie. Good to see you. Saving this to my spinning playlist. Thanks, Rachel. Oh, great. Mars, I'm glad. Okay, so I wanted to talk about my tincanknits sweater really quickly. We're getting on in time like we always do. I so appreciate you guys. Actually, let's talk about my tea towels first. They're not done, but they are off the loom. So these were put onto my compact, my Leclerc compact on New Year's Day this year, 2020. And as we all know, 2020 has not gone the way that we all planned. So I've started pinning. I got 10 tea towels off of my 11-yard warp. So this is the pile of them here. They're not all pressed. I had done the first two and a half in this 2-2 twill with this rainbow plaid patterning. And I know it's beautiful and I know that it looks amazing, but to weave that for 8 more towels and to get this off the loom within this lifetime was not going to happen. And so I ended up, so I have 2 that are completely end-to-end this rainbow plaid that's in this 2-2 twill, and I'll lay this down so that you guys can see it. So this one is pressed. It's pinned to be hemmed. So I did a tabby weave hem, 1.5 inches, and then I went into the 2-2 twill, and every 4 picks, I switched the colors to match the 4 ends per inch in the warp. And so you can imagine the ends, not only the ends, you guys can see all of the ends, the ends, but also the time. And I had every single one of my boat shuttles going, and it's still like, it just, you can't carry them up this side because anyways, each towel was taking about 4 weeks to complete. I don't mind labor intensive projects, but with the way that this year has gone and just the things that we've all had to cope with, I just felt like I needed to cleanse and let go, get some stuff off the loom, start fresh. So both of my looms are actually Rudy Nudie right now. They're both naked. And so what I ended up doing was I did still continue on with some of the tutu twill and the rainbow experience, if you will. I'm going to call these the rainbow experience. The inspiration for these towels, actually, I want to talk about that really quickly. It was actually some hand-woven artwork, so stuff that was in an installation project. And I wish I had saved the website, but I can't find it now. But it was of some Swedish design and Swedish weaving art, and I took the colors from that and arranged them. So very, very different aesthetic than often what we get in North America, and their use of color is very different. And the funny thing is I had this great conversation with my mom about it, because she's an art history major and really loves all that stuff, and it's been all over the world. And that was something that she immediately said was how different their colors are in Scandinavia and how different the light is because they're so far north. So I did end up with two full towels, which I am keeping. And then I ended up with another one. The next one, let me see if I can show these sort of in a way that makes sense. So the next one, I ended up starting off with the rainbow, and then I switched to a tutu twill, and you can see I made a mistake halfway up, so I'll probably keep this one. That would be hanging to the back, but it's still like my mom saw it immediately. So that was the next one where I started to kind of pivot. And then from there, I started changing the warp color and using one of the colors, and you can see that I was having some problems with the compact. I couldn't get the tension right when I went back to start weaving and try to get these done. But I started doing sort of a panel of the design halfway up on the front of the towel and then finishing off with tabby. And so I kept going with that. So then I did one with navy blue, still was having some trouble with the tensioning and with the warp threads, and had some more problems up here. Can't see because that's behind my head, right here. So some skips, and then I switched again the colors. I really like this one with the light teal and the navy blue border. I thought that one worked out really well. And then I went to a lighter one. This is one of my favorite towels actually out of the whole batch. And then I started playing with some more tutu twill. Again, I was having tensioning problems, and so I went to tabby after that, but I think it still worked out quite nicely. And then I actually started playing around with just tabby and got rid of the tutu twill altogether. And actually these last couple of towels are my favorites in the batch, and I'm going to keep these as well. I don't think I'm not going to gift a lot of these ones away because there are so many skips and so many mistakes. So I washed them. I threw them in the wash. The fabric isn't as tight and as firm as I would want it to be. I wove at 18 ends per inch. And I warped it at 18 ends per inch, and it's just a little bit, the tabby weave, the plain weave, is a little bit loose. The tutu twill is really nice. It created a really beautiful fabric, but the tutu twill, I think I probably needed to tighten it up a little bit. So you can see I was having some tension problems. There's lots of skips. So a little bit bummed about that, considering how much work these were. But I think I also learned a lot about the compact, which is actually sitting right here. It's all folded up. I brought it downstairs to finish these off. I can really see how these were a big project, lots of color work. And I think if I had only warped up like say 3 yards and done 3 towels, I think it would have felt a lot more manageable. I probably would have gotten a nicer tension on the loom. because Mike and I had a lot of trouble. We had to keep rebeaming, and rebeaming means you pull the warp off and put it back on, and pull the warp off and put it back on. It just, we could not get it on in an even way. I also couldn't get a firm enough beat. So when you're beading and you're on a floor loom, the compact is quite a lightweight loom, and I just couldn't get it to like really get a firm, hard beat like I can on my big jack loom. And so I should have set it at 20 ends per inch. I could absolutely go back and fix the skips, Laureline. I totally could. And I have all of the thrums from cutting off at the end of the loom, and I have them in a bag. And what I thought I would do actually is go back and fix the ones that are going to be gifted. I'm going to go back and fix when at soccer practice, just sit there and do the needlework. So yeah, it was just a tensioning issue. I had a lot of trouble getting this onto the loom. The last few towels, for whatever reason, the further into the warp I got, the better the tension got, which I'm not sure if it was just me getting into a rhythm again and getting comfortable again, or if it was also just getting to the end of the loop. So yeah, so Liz Gibson has lots of stuff. That is Liz Gibson, Rebecca. I can totally go back and fix them. I just, the ones that I'm going to keep, I'm not going to bother. And like something like this here is a really good example where it's going to get hidden in the hem. So what I thought I would do with some of these, like this one here is a good example. There's a skip right there, but it's going to get folded up into the hem. So what I'm going to do is hem them, and then I'll see kind of which ones I need to fix, and then I'll rewash them, because I always wash them again and iron them after I've hemmed them, because usually hemming kind of changes things a little bit. So and then I'll cut off all of the ends, all of the myriad ends. So yeah, Localite changes everything for sure. It's wild how different feel. Yeah, you know, it's funny, Becca, because we were talking, because we've got family who live in Inverness in northern Scotland. It's not even that far north compared to like the rest of the country. And my mom and I were talking about that amazing twilight, that purple that settles across that part of, well, most of Scotland later in the evening. And Mike and I, night after night after night, we were just so struck by this amazing purple landscape. And it changes the your perception of things. And I think it also changes how you interpret and how you see things, like how, you know, a lot of that color then goes into our making and into our artwork if we're artists or are creating and are making. Like it just kind of all ends up being reflected in the colors that we're drawn to and the things that we want to make. I think that's totally how that kind of ends up working. So let's talk about Love Note. And I'm just going to turn off the DSLR so you can see it. Let me pull it up here as I knock everything over. So I finished my Love Note, and I'm going to rip out part of it. I'm sure that you are not surprised by this point about that. I'm just going to move the camera over a little bit so that you guys can see. So this is Love Note by tincanknits. So this is for our tincanknits along. And I am using Smallbird Workshop CVM Mohair that I hand spun. This is I spun this on my Ashford e-spinner over the course of a week that I was camping with my mom up in the interior of British Columbia. And I'm knitting one of the smaller adult sizes, and I was really going to be cutting it close for yardage. So in the community right now, we're doing this tincanknits along that is just, you can use commercial yarn, you can use hand spun yarn, you can do a project that you've already started. The idea is just to come together and finish off the year making something together. And the tincanknits patterns, a lot of people have them in their queue. They've got stuff that they've wanted to make from them for a long time. And so it just felt like the right fit for us to work on through to the end of the year and maybe even into the new year. So I had about 1,000 yards of hand spun, lace weight hand spun, and you can see that I've held it double. I was really against doing this and holding it double and knitting this yarn this way. And then it was actually Kelly who mentioned in the Slack channel about maybe you know, giving that a shot, and I thought, oh, it's going to make a dense yarn, I'm not too sure, blah blah blah. Well, I'm glad that I actually did a swatch, because this is the result after I swatched, obviously, because I did do a swatch for this, because you're knitting on 6mm needles with fingering weight yarn held double, and I just wasn't going to knit an entire sweater without doing a swatch. So for the lace work, you can see you've got all this gorgeous lace work. I have actually washed and blocked all of this, not since I've done the sleeves. So I washed and blocked it one day when it was really hot outside, and I could put it in the sun and it would dry within the day. And as you can see, I was talking about it last show, I was really hoping that all of this would really lay down. Come on, move up, Diana. Don't be shy. There we go. I was really hoping that all of this would sort of lay down a little bit more nicely, and it's done a nice job. And when you put it on, it certainly looks really quite nice. And I put a darker tank top underneath, because it's next to the skin soft. This fiber is that soft. And I was really surprised at how comfortable it was. It's very warm. That said, I picked up, for the stitches that I didn't do a provisional cast on like the pattern says, and I picked up and I followed the instructions for the size that I was making, and I showed virtual spin group. I was like, look, it's all done. Look at, and I was making a joke out of it. I was like, look at this circus trick. So I put it on over my head, and like, I couldn't get it on past my head. It was the cast off, the ribbing, how tight it got. It was just way too much. So, I ripped it back during spin group on Tuesday, and I picked up the stitches a second time. I didn't do any decreases around the yoke, and instead I took the total number of stitches that I had picked up around the neckline from the center back all the way around the front and all the way around to the back. This is probably an easier place to show you. I took that number, it was 80, and I divided it by 3. And so and from there, I worked 2/3 of the stitches to short rows. So I think I knit like 28 this way, worked a short row. I'll show you from the back. 28 stitches, worked a short row, wrap and turn, worked all the way back 28 stitches to the other side, wrap and turn, came back 4 stitches or 5 stitches previously to the last wrap and turn, and then did the same on the other side. And then I started the ribbing all the way around. And I worked the ribbing for roughly an inch, and then I cast off very loosely. So I changed that neckline. And I think it worked out really quite nicely. I think on me too, the neck is really quite lovely. And I think this, because there's a lot of give to this, there's a lot of positive ease, this will stretch over time and relax, and like even just hanging out on Diana for the last couple of days, waiting to show off to you guys. The sweater's relaxed quite a bit. It's not tight at all. The other thing, and then I weighed what I had remaining, and I divided the remaining yarn into 2 balls. I ended up with 50 grams left over from this part of the sweater for the sleeves. So I took that 50 grams and I divided it into 2 center pull balls that were 25 grams each, because I needed it to be a center pull ball, because I was knitting, like holding 2, you know, held double, holding the yarn double. And then I just kept knitting and knitting and knitting and knitting until I got down to the end. And actually on one of the sleeves, I had done the ribbing and cast off, thinking that I wouldn't have enough yarn to go any further. And so when I got there with this sleeve, I actually pushed it further, because I had ended up with quite a bit of yarn left over, and I was able to go even further. So then I ripped back this sleeve and matched it, and they were both done within an evening. The sleeves were so fast. So they're actually a little bit longer than 3/4 length. They actually come down to about here on me. So the top of the ribbing on the pink velvet, which is perfect. Now, the other thing is that when I actually have this on, I've talked about this on the podcast copious times, so I won't go on and on. I'm quite long torsoed, as you guys know. So on Diana here with this summer skirt on her, it looks like it's a long enough sweater and it looks like it's quite long, but it actually only just hits my navel. And from one of the sleeves, I have a bit of yarn left over, probably enough to add about 2 rounds of ribbing and then cast off again. So I could probably add about 1/2 inch of knitting to the bottom of the sweater. And I'm gonna do that and just lengthen it just a little bit more, because if it was just a little bit longer, it would be perfect. And I could wear it with high-waisted jeans. So that's my plan. So I am gonna do that this week, but I just didn't have time this week. Yeah. So that is that. So let's talk a little bit about some community participation. So for our tin can knits along, let's talk about, so Janine is here today. I hope she's still in the live chat. Janine-ish, post number 19, shared for our September giveaway. She's got 16 ounces of matching 50% merino, 25% nylon, 25% bamboo fiber in her stash, and she's dreaming of getting it on her wheel. She's hoping to get a sweater's quantity of 2-ply out of it, but she is still too green a spinner to guarantee. Her gauge and grist isn't always as intended, and it's really beautiful olive, dusty pink, and brown colors. It's called Cider House by Greenwood Fiberworks. She's hoping the blend will be cool enough to wear for 3 seasons in my pretty temperate climate. She's in coastal Northern California. So our giveaway for September was to tell us about a blend that you were dreaming of spinning, that you had loved spinning. And so that was Janine's contribution. So Janine, I will be sending you some blended Shetland. These are some nests with some silk noil that I have been making. And it's some gray and black Shetland carded together. And if you send me your mailing address, I will send that out to you. So congratulations to Janine. I knew it was you, Janine, because of how you spell your name. Yeah, so I love it when people are in the chat and they can actually receive they're actually here and I can actually say, like, congratulations. You don't have to be a patron to be a part of the monthly giveaway. This is for everybody, anybody who watches the show. And you can comment here on YouTube or in the Ravelry thread, the episode thread in the Ravelry group, which I have linked in the show notes. So for October, tell us about your spinning plans for the rest of the year. What are you looking forward to learning, exploring, and making? The episode thread on Ravelry, I will throw that into the show notes. And, or you can just comment below on YouTube here. So congratulations, Janine. So our Tin Can Knits Along, I wanted to share Martha's project. Look at this yarn, it's amazing. So Martha, who's also in the chat, I think she's still here. I'm so excited to actually take part properly in a project here. So this is for our Tin Can Knits Along. You can share on Instagram, hashtag Tin Can Knits Along. So this is her hand spun yarn. So I spun this yarn maybe a year ago now and had no idea what pattern to do with it, just that it needed to be something in a colorwork yoke of some kind. And then when Rachel suggested this, I knew I had to join in. So I spent about 4 hours working on a strange brew chart. And I didn't mean to start so soon, but I couldn't help myself. Oh my goodness, Martha, I love that you cast on so quickly. It's all Falkland Merino that I bought undyed from my local yarn shop, which has sadly now closed down. They still have a branch, but it's now an hour's drive away. That's really too bad, Martha. I'm sorry to hear that. My local yarn shop will be closing eventually too, and I'm just so bummed. And I dyed the pinky skein in the wool and spun it up, and then went back and got some more to spin to work with. I dyed the bluey skeins after I'd spun them. I'm not sure there's really enough contrast between my main color and the contrast color. I think there is, Martha. I think you'll be surprised once the knitting is finished. It might come through a bit more, and honestly, I'm enjoying it so much as it is that I don't know that I care enough to do anything about it. the general idea in my chart is that I have started with the contrast color as my main, and gradually she'll switch it around, which I love. I love that effect. Jennifer Steinglass does that a lot in her yoked patterns, and I think it's so cool. And so does the Petite Knitter. Is it the Petite Knitter? She's located in, is it Nunavut? The Petite Knitter. I'm thinking of, yeah, the Petite Knitter. I'll link one of her sweater patterns in the chat, 'cause I'm not talking about Petite Knits. I'm talking about the Petite Knitter, and she's located in the Arctic, the Archipelago Islands in the Arctic. And she often does that, where she'll switch around the colors. The pattern is lots of diamonds and zigzag shapes. Really beautiful, Martha. Really, 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 really well done. Beautiful. Love the colors, says Christy. That's so cool, says Mars. Jean's a sucker for pink. The pink is amazing. I did rip it out despite what I said in my post. So this is Martha. Martha's in the chat. And she was saying, I did rip it out despite what I said in my post. I altered the pattern I had made and re-dyed all but the blue. And that she'd already caked into a darker purple. So she's going to do 3 color chevrons. Very cool, Martha. I can't wait to see the evolution of your work. So as you go from what you had here to the next sort of iteration, if you will, and then when you start knitting again. So please, please share. Yeah, really gorgeous work, Martha. So breeding color studies is going on in our community right now, and it's running until the end of December, and then we will be starting our next breeding color study, which I am so excited about. I'm so excited about our next one. That will be starting in January. So Katrina's been scheming in the background, and it's really exciting. So this is Megan's. Megan is at Likey Meg, and if you want to catch up, if you're part of the Patreon community, Woolen Spinning Radio is the audio podcast that accompanies the show, and it's a monthly podcast. Oftentimes there's a bonus episode, so there's often 2 per month. And they're available as audio. And recently I've been able to record some video episodes as well. And those are available even just for $1 a month. So anybody who pledges gets access to Woolen Spinning Radio. So Megan created with her breeding color study this time around, she made a crepe yarn where she separated the lights and the darks. The lights went in a gradient from pink to white to yellow to green. And then the darks, she alternated the dark green and the dark pink in stripes. Very cool. This gave her sort of a color gamp yarn where she had both the dark colors running against the light gradient background. She had wanted to weave with the crepe yarn, so she did. She used the 12 dents per inch heddle on her Kromsky harp, so that's a rigid heddle. And she made a color gamp with this as well. I'm just going to turn the camera slightly so that I can move a little bit out of the light for you guys. It's all over my face. I'm really sorry. I know it's hard to see when the light is shining in, but you can focus on Megan's amazing weaving instead. So she made a color gamp with this as well, and she divided the yarns into light yarns, the pink, white, yellow, and green, and then warped some of each of those. Then she wove some of each in the weft so that all of the colors were crossing each other at some point. She loves the texture of this cloth. It is so interesting to look at for just plain weave. I will definitely weave with crepe yarns again. This was such a cool thing about spinning yourself, is that this is something you can't buy. I made my cloth into a pillow, a spinning pillow to be exact, that I learned since I learned that I need more back support from Carcer Demers. So if you guys don't know who he is, his website is Ergo I Knit, which I just love if you understand the reference, because he specializes in ergonomics. Ergo I Knit. I love it. And finally, I was tickled pink to find some matching green, Anne of Green Gables cloth for the back. And overall, she's very satisfied with the project. She goes on to talk about color gamps and a color gamp weaving project. So if you want to read more, please head to the show notes. And then Jada shared her yarn. Oh boy, I just started spinning my bat, and let me tell you, I feel like a new spinner again. This was the first time I had spun from a bat, mostly spin commercially prepped home top, and she really only knows what she's doing from what I showed on the show and from looking at other videos on YouTube. So she first unfolded the bat and started by tearing off strips of the dark green end of the spin. He says that didn't work well at all. It's looked like when I started spinning 13 years ago, very thick and inconsistent. He spun up all of the dark green and decided to break the rest of the bat down the middle across the colors and roll each side into a roll lag like Rachel had showed on the show. That seems to work better for me, and she was able to spin thinner, but still not as consistent as she's used to. She was able to spin the second roll lag later, and she'll ply them up and she'll post a picture. So it ended up a sort of gradient. It was nice to spin the roll lag, no breaks, no joins. Not very. She says it's not very pretty, but here it is. It's quite thick, though I haven't measured wraps prints yet. And she bought the bats because it's new to me, and she'd have to try another fiber and bats before she decides if she likes them or not. So this is the thing about breed and color study, and why I wanted to share Jada's project with you, because this is how we learn, and this is how we grow, and this is how we get better. And you know, when we come across a prep that we've not done before, it's really hard at first to know how to spin it. And you know, reaching out to others in the community to guide us and to help us is really important. And this is how we get better. And this yarn is still usable yarn. It's still really beautiful. You've got gorgeous colors. You've got a lovely twist angle. And this would make a really great toque if you put it with another bulky weight yarn. You could have this gorgeous color work gradient going up through the toque. So really well done, Jada. All right, lastly, I wanted to share with you something that Rebecca made. And Rebecca, or Rebby J, we've been talking about blends in the community for a while now. We've been really exploring a lot of blends in the spinning in the wool circle, which happens on Friday mornings. And the thing about blends that I've been really enjoying is sort of just pushing my spinning into new areas and working with some luxury fibers that are different and that I don't often work with. And so in November and December coming up later this fall, we're going to be looking in the How I Spin content at exploring different blends and how they spun up and how they worked. And it's going to sort of help us to kick off our luxury fibers that we're going to be studying in the new year. So if you want to learn more about that How I Spin content, just head to the show notes, patreon.com/wellforpearls, and you're looking for the co-executive producer, which is one of the tiers for you to join. And I wanted to share this because Rebecca had done a recent card spin and knit that was a blend. And so she thinks she is a broken record because she keeps talking about the same yarn, but this is her best blend, one of the only blends that she's made herself, let alone that she's completed into a project. This is her Shetland alpaca blend. She just finished knitting a sweater from it, and the surprise to her was that despite the completely woolen nature of the yarn, hand carded into roll legs and spun long draw, this yarn is very sturdy. It's hard to break with her hands. She thinks that because of the alpaca, which was still in the fleece form, so it wasn't even washed, when she carded this blend, it was a longer stapled, maybe about 4 inches on average, with almost no crimp, because of course alpaca is it's a camelid, so it doesn't have any crimp or any kind of, there's no scales, so you need twist to hold it together. So even though it's very smooth and it adds softness to the blends, it also adds strength. Supposedly it adds drape, but I don't read it as drape in this fabric. It feels more like substance. The yarn has more weight and substance than I would expect from a 100% Shetland yarn of similar construction. The sweater is the Evergreen Mountain Pullover by Bonnie Sennett, and I've linked that in the show notes because it is a gorgeous sweater. It was in Interweave. Interweave Knits, I think, in the spring of 2018, and I have to admit I was tempted to go and find that issue and pull it out just for this sweater, because the sweater itself, it's a drop shoulder with an all over lace pattern in the body, in the front and the back, and then you've got a split dropped hem front and back, and I was really taken with it. So really beautiful, really well done, Rebecca. Just absolutely gorgeous. It's a stunning sweater, and please go and look at the pullover because it's really amazing. I think that's it for today, and my voice is completely given out, but we've gotten to the end of the show notes, so I feel like that's a win all round. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for spending the time with me. I'm sorry about the light. It just all of a sudden the sky opened up and I've got sunlight streaming in. So I'm very thankful for that. I hope you have a wonderful week. Enjoy Spin Together. Next week's episode, it is Canadian Thanksgiving here next weekend. So next week will be a premiere. And that everybody will be welcome to join that. I will be in the chat visiting with you guys as we do that. We are going camping. It'll probably be our last weekend out for the season, and I really hope that you guys are able to join us next weekend for the premiere. When it's a premiere episode, it just means that it was pre-recorded, but there's still a live chat and I'll still join in with you while it's streaming. So I look forward to joining you then. Before my voice completely goes away, I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy Spinzilla, or Spin Together, sorry. Enjoy Knit City and the Fiber Love Affair. I hope you have a wonderful weekend enjoying your fibery corner of the world. And until next time, happy spinning, happy knitting, happy dreaming. Bye, everyone.